Starting a website in Webflow is incredibly easy, and we give you multiple ways to go about doing it. Once you're ready, simply click the New Website button on the top right of your dashboard. Before selecting your starting point, you'll need to give both a name and a subdomain for your website. The name is what will appear both on your dashboard as the name of your site, but it will also appear on the tab of the browser when the users visit your site. Your subdomain is what will be used for the link generated in Webflow. You can also add custom domains, which we'll touch on later. Before starting your website, you have the option to either start a site from scratch or use one of our many fantastic templates. If you want the most customization, you can start with a blank site. This will give you a near unlimited amount of customization options to fulfill any look and feel you want for your site. If you want to get going a little bit faster or have something with the basics already in place, you can choose one of our many free and premium templates. These templates range from one-page wonders to multi-page websites, each preloaded with features including navbars, sliders, forms, and interactions. Each of these templates are also tested and will work on all of your different devices. Plus, we add more all the time, so be sure to check out webflow.com/templates anytime. Who knows? The next template entry might be yours. When you first enter the Webflow Designer, it can be a little overwhelming, but with a little time and practice, it'll feel like second nature. Starting on the left-hand side, you'll have your Add Elements and Pages panels. The Add Elements panel is where you'll find all of the objects, widgets, and elements you'll use to add to your page, including some of the basic layout options, typography, media, as well as your favorite features like sliders and navbars. Anything you need to add to your page or website, you'll find here. In the Pages panel, you'll be able to see an overview of all the pages on your website. This is not only where you can select and organize all of your pages, but also where you can add and duplicate new pages. Down on the left-hand side, you'll find additional features that will help in your designing process. You can choose to show or hide an element's edges, show empty elements, view your page's grid system, and also a nifty X-ray mode that will give you a deeper view at how your elements are laid out on the page. On the bottom, we have further help resources, including more videos and help documentation. I also recommend taking a look at the keyboard shortcuts, as there's a lot of fantastic time-saving elements in there. On the very top left of the Webflow Designer, you'll have the Back to Dashboard button, which will simply take you back to your dashboard. Next to the Dashboard button, you have the Preview button, which takes on the shape of an eye. This feature is incredibly powerful and allows you to view your site live in the browser before publishing it. Also on the top of the Designer, you'll have your different device views, which is an incredibly powerful Webflow feature that allows you to view your site on each device and make style changes accordingly. On the top right, you'll have another handful of very useful buttons. The first are your undo and redo buttons, which might come in handy. The next is an icon that lets you know if your page is currently saved. The green check mark, which we see here, means that our page is saved, so we could leave and not lose any of our content. If this icon is red, it means that changes could not be saved, typically due to a bad internet connection. The next is to export your website. Webflow prides itself on creating clean CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. And here you can choose to export the code and use it any way you wish. It will also export any image or font assets that you have on the site. Lastly, we have the Publish button, the magic little link that will take your site live for the rest of the world to see. Simply click on the button and your website can be live in seconds. The final panels are located here on the right-hand side of your screen. This is where the Style, Settings, Navigator, Style Manager, and Symbols panel are located. The Style panel is one that you're going to be using quite a bit. It's where you're going to be adding classes and styling all the different elements on your website. The Settings panel allows you to edit the settings of many of the elements on your page, like links, buttons, navbars, sliders, and more. Pretty much every element that you click on will have settings here. The Navigator panel is an incredibly powerful tool. Not only can you view the structure of your entire website, but you can also move any of those elements throughout your website with ease. The Style Manager gives you a view of all the classes that are being used on your website. You also have the ability to edit and change the name of them. The last panel is your Assets panel, which includes both symbols and interactions, two features that are incredibly important in improving your workflow and in adding engaging interactions onto your website. We'll cover both of these in later videos. And that's it. Again, at first it feels like a lot, but we're confident with a little time and practice, you'll be a pro in no time. When getting started with Webflow, it's important to understand the basics. Yes, you can simply drag elements onto the page, but there's more to it than that. Unlike other web building tools that allow you to drag elements absolutely anywhere on the page, Webflow relies on the fluid structure of the web. We do this because that's how the web works, and the end result is one that is much more reliable and structurally sound. While building a site in Webflow, the core principle we refer to is the box model, which is basically the idea of putting boxes within other boxes. I'm going to start by adding some elements to my page from the Add panel located on the left-hand side. I'm first going to add a section. Within this section, I'll place a few more elements, including a container, an image, and a header. Notice so far, all I've done is simply add objects into other objects. This is the simple principle you will use to create the structure on your website. I can also easily move these objects around by simply clicking and dragging them around the page. For a more accurate move, I can also use the Navigator panel located on the right-hand side. So now that we've added and moved objects on our page, why doesn't it look good? Well, the final step is to add styles to these elements. To do this, simply click on the element you want to add a style to. In this case, I'll choose the section. Then you add a class in the Style panel located on the right-hand side. Once you've added a class, you have the ability to give an almost unlimited amount of styles and attributes to make it look and feel the way you want. So here, we've covered the three basic steps in using Webflow: adding elements, moving those elements, and styling them. The structure of your website is incredibly important. Not only does strong structure lead to a better user experience, but it also makes it easier for search engines to index and crawl your website. Let's take a look at this website template as an example. Structure is clear across this entire page and is used to create and separate the different sections throughout, as well as organize the content like we see here with the different columns. For a different view on how all these elements fit together, let's take a look at the Navigator panel on the top right. Here we can see all of the different sections, containers, and columns that make up this entire page. And at the top, we'll see our body, which is the wrapper that holds everything onto the page and is therefore the highest level of structure on your site. When creating the structure on the site yourself, you will rely on a few simple elements: sections, containers, and columns. Sections will take up the full width of the page from left to right. Examples of different sections are seen all across this page and used with different background colors to distinguish themselves and the content inside of it. It is also common practice and an HTML5 standard to use sections as the primary or initial wrapper that will hold all of your content inside of it. Not only are sections great for this from a design perspective, but also because it makes your website easier for search engines to index. Containers are also very common, and their main attribute is that their left and right margin is set to auto, with a max width that won't cover the entire page. The end result is a container that can hold your content nicely in the center of the page. We have an example here of a container doing just that and grouping this content together. Notice what happens if we move one piece of this content to the outside. Instead of aligning in the middle, it will go to the very left. This isn't necessarily wrong, and containers aren't necessary for every section, but it's a great structure element to use when you want your content to be concentrated to the middle of the page. Lastly, we have columns. Columns add further structure to your page by allowing you to align groups of content together in a row. This is a great example of a column being used to divide this group of content into thirds. You can edit the settings of your columns by simply clicking on the column, then navigate to the Settings panel on the top right, And here you can choose how many columns you'd like, as well as the spacing that each column will take up. You can also toggle the column views for each of your different devices, which we cover in our responsive overview video. In addition to sections, containers, and columns, two more elements that you'll use when building structure on your site are div blocks and link blocks. A div block can have many purposes, but think of it as a way to group elements together as one. Here we can see a great example of just that. If we look at the structure hierarchy in the Navigator panel, we'll first see that there is a container, then a set of columns, then in each of these columns we see two div blocks. What these div blocks are doing are simply organizing the content that lives inside of this column. Now that these elements are grouped together in this div block, we can move and manipulate them as one single unit. So again, think of div blocks as a great tool to further organize or group some of your elements together. A link block is nearly identical to a div block and can be used for the same reasons of grouping elements together. However, there's one major difference. Anything that lives inside of this link block will now become a clickable element. A common use case is to insert images into link blocks so that they become a clickable link. If we take a look at the Navigator panel, we can see that there are link blocks placed into each of these different columns, and inside of it, a logo image for each of the companies. And notice that if we preview the page and we hover over each of these logos, they are now clickable elements. Also, just like with links and buttons, you can manage the settings of your link blocks by going to the Settings panel on the top right of your screen. Here you can choose where you would like your link to go, including a custom link, a different page, a section on your page, or an email or even a phone number. And now that you have the basic understanding of both a div block and a link block, be sure to watch the next video to see how all of our structure elements come together. And if you haven't already, be sure to watch our structure video that covers the basic elements in a section, container, and columns. Now that we understand the overview of all of these basic structure elements covered in the first two videos, let's use them to create a section on this site. For example, I'm going to create a new testimonial section. To begin adding these elements, simply navigate to the Add panel located on the left-hand side. From here, we will first drag in our section and move it directly into the body of the page. Next, I want to add in my container so that all my content will be concentrated in the middle of the page. And next, I'll drag in my column element, which I will use to divide my testimonial sections. In this case, I want to have 3 columns. Alright, so we've already built a basic structure so far by simply dragging in a few elements onto our page. But there's one more important aspect that we still need to do before this comes together: adding styles. Adding styles to these elements is what turns this section into something like the other sections that we see on this page. To start, I want to add a class to my section so that I can change the background color as well as add some spacing inside of it. To add a class to an object, simply click on the object first, then I'm going to navigate to the Style panel on the top right. Here I will add my class name by simply clicking inside of the text box and giving this section a name. Now that I've added a class, I can begin to add styles. For this section, I really just want to do 2 things: add background color and create some spacing. Let's first add the spacing by adjusting the padding of this section. Margin and padding are going to be your primary style choice for manipulating the space both within and outside of your element. Padding, which is what I'm going to use here, adds space inside of your element. Margin adds spacing to the outside. Looking at it in X-ray mode, we can see the padding represented as the green shading for inside space, and margin as the blue shading to represent the outside space. In Webflow, you can also change margin and padding to opposite sides by holding Alt on your keyboard and adjusting either the top or the bottom. Webflow will mirror the space for both sides. Great. Now that we have a little space to work with, let's add some background color by simply changing the fill color within the background section here. And perfect. Now let's begin to add our testimonial content. The first thing I want to do is add in a div block to this column, which will work as the wrapper that's going to group all of the content inside of it. Next, I want to add an image, which will be a picture of the person giving the testimonial. I also want this image to be clickable, so I'm going to also drag a link block that I can place this image inside of. Then I'll add some paragraph text that'll be used for the testimonial itself. And lastly, I'll add a text block, which is going to include the person's name and their title. Now that I have the structure in place, I can begin to add the copy and the content, starting by uploading the picture. And finally, I can copy in this great testimonial, which was said by a very nice gentleman named John Smith. Great. Now there's just one more style that I want to add, and that's on the div block that's holding all of these elements. So just like when I added styles to the section, I'm first going to click on the div block, then navigate to the style panel to add my class. Now that I've added a class, I'm going to add some padding so that I can add more spacing within this block. To add padding to all sides, simply hold Shift on your keyboard. Perfect, this is looking great. And now, because all of these elements are grouped together in this one div block, I can simply click on the block, copy it using Command-C on my keyboard, and paste it using Command-V into my other two columns. Now, instead of having to recreate each of these for each of the individual columns, all I need to do is simply update the content. And that's about it. We've covered all the basics in these past 3 videos on how to better understand your website structure and all the elements that make it up, but also why it's important not only to your overall user experience, but also to search engines and SEO. Adding styles to your website is the cornerstone to making your website unique. And the way you add styles to objects on the web is by first adding a class. For example, I've added this object to the site that includes a div block, a heading, and paragraph element. So why does it look like this one? The reason is I haven't added any class to it. By adding a class to an element, I'm given the opportunity to then add styles to it. By leveraging these styles, I can manipulate the elements to look and behave how I want them to. Another important thing to understand about classes is that the style associated to it will transcend to all other objects with the same class. Notice as that I make a change on one, it also changes on all the other objects that share the same class. The benefit here is that you can make a change to one object, and it will update everywhere, all across your site. In Webflow, the styles associated to each class are cascading. This means that styles made on a desktop view, for example, will move down to the devices below it. Styles do not, however, cascade upwards, meaning that any style changes that I make on a tablet would not affect the styles of a desktop. When adding a class name, you are given free rein to name the class as you wish. However, that doesn't mean that you should get too creative. A good rule of thumb when selecting a class name is to pick names that are easy to understand and identify not only for you, the person building the site, but also if anyone else were to look at it as well. In other words, you could identify the item attributed to a class just by reading the class name. Some examples of good class names could be button, navlink, and hero slider. Another thing to remember with class names is that they are not case sensitive, meaning you couldn't have 2 class names that are only differentiated by upper and lower case. For example, navbar with caps and navbar with all lowercase would be treated as exactly the same class. A responsive, mobile-ready website is no longer a luxury, but a must-have in today's world where over 50% of web browsing is done on a mobile device. The reason that having a responsive website is so important is simply due to the user experience. Navigating a full website on such a small screen is uncomfortable. So instead, responsive websites will adjust to better optimize this experience for any screen size, including the navigation bar, as well as the different sections across your page. So now that you understand the importance, how do you go about building one? Well, in Webflow, we make it easy to both create and edit your website on different mobile devices by simply clicking on these device icons at the top of the page. Here, you can edit the desktop, which is the default view, tablet, and 2 mobile views, including landscape and portrait. You can also preview your website on each of these devices as well, meaning you don't have to test your website on your phone or your tablet just to make sure it looks good. Desktop is where you're going to be doing the most of your building work. But now, once your site is complete, you should take a look at all of the different devices to make sure that it's looking and performing exactly the way you'd like it. Depending on how you built your site, you may not need to do much here, as Webflow will automatically adjust your columns, your navbar, and various structures to respond to the different device screens. We can see here how the columns have already responded and are now stacking on top of each other instead of being shown side by side. To edit this, simply click on the columns, navigate to the settings panel on the top right, and here you can see how you would like to adjust your columns so that they display the best on different devices. You have the option to show all of your columns on one row. You could show them at a full width, or in some cases, depending on how many columns you have, you could show 2 to a row. In this case, and in most cases with mobile, taking up the full width is best. This is also a great example of where before, developers might spend hours meeting the requirements of all of these different devices, whereas you can make your entire website mobile ready in just a matter of minutes. Another thing to understand when editing your website for different devices are the styles themselves. When working with a responsive website, the styles associated to your elements will cascade downwards. What this simply means is that any styles that are done on your desktop view will trickle down and carry over to all of the devices below it. For example, if I change the background color here on desktop, and then we navigate to the different mobile views, we'll notice that this style trickles down and is now a part of each of these different devices. What's also important to understand is that these styles will not cascade upwards. So any styles done on a mobile device, for example, like changing the font size or font color, won't affect this style or text on any of the devices above it. This means that you can create custom styles to mobile and tablet devices that won't affect the other device views, leading you to maximum customization to make sure that each of your devices is displaying the way you'd like. Link elements work as the key navigating elements that users will use to navigate your site and beyond. They help you connect your users to different sections, pages, and even other websites. In Webflow, you can create these links with 3 different elements: a button, a text link, and a link block. Each of these elements works towards the same goal, but goes about it in different ways. Let's add all 3 elements to this section just to see what they do. Just like every other element, to add these links to your page, we'll simply drag them from the Add panel on the left-hand side. Let's start with the button. The button is a great link when you want to call someone's attention to it. You can also give it a class to further customize your button. As with most linkable objects, it's good to add a hover treatment so that the user knows that the element is clickable. We cover the use of hover states in more detail in a later video. The next link element is a text link. Text links can be added in 2 different ways. The first is by simply dragging it from the Add panel like we did with the button. Another common way to add text links is by linking something through inline text, like within this paragraph. To create a link this way, simply highlight the text you'd wish to link from, then click the link button that appears on the top of the text wrapper. Or for a shortcut, you can also use Command K or Control K on your keyboard. The final method of adding a link is by using link blocks. Link blocks are used when you want to create a link around an object or a group of objects. A common use case is to create a linkable image. Currently, outside of this link block, this image cannot be clicked. However, once we place this image inside of the link block, it can be. Regardless of the link style, you can always edit your link settings from the settings panel on the top right of your page. Here in the link settings, you can choose how and where you would like your link to go. You can link to a direct URL, a page on your own site, a section on your own site, or an email and phone number. Let's set up these 3 links we've created here to demonstrate the different link locations. For this button, let's choose to send this link to www.webflow.com and to open it in a new tab. Let's take a look. Perfect. This button is now opening in a new tab and taking the user to webflow.com. For the inner paragraph link, let's choose to have it go to a page on our own site. So we'll click on the link, and in the link settings, we'll go to the page option, and let's choose the portfolio page. In this case, we'll choose not to have it open in a new tab. Let's take a look. And great, this link will now take us to another page on our website. To get back to the home page, we can simply navigate back using the Pages panel on the top left side. And lastly, for the link block, let's have it go to a different section on this page. We have a few options that we can choose from this list. Each of these are sections that have been given an ID that we can link to. In this case, let's choose the portfolio section. And if we preview the page, we can see now that instead of going to a different site or a different page on our site, it will simply take us down the page to the specific section. And how did it know that this was the portfolio section? Well, because we've added an ID to this section. To view, add, or modify an ID, simply click on the element, in this case, this section, and in the settings panel on the top right, we will see a field to add an ID. Once it's added, it will be included in the drop-down list as an available section to link to. Your navbar is one of the most important elements on your website. So Webflow made it incredibly easy to both add and modify it right on your site. All it takes is a simple drag and drop. Now that it's on our site, let's take a look at the Navigator panel so that we can see the structure that makes up the widget itself. Inside the navbar, we have a container, which holds the brand link block for us to add our logo, a nav menu, which holds each of the nav links, and a nav button, which we'll touch on shortly. You can begin to add elements and style your navbar very easily. Let's start by adding the logo. The best way to do this is by simply dragging in an image element into the provided brand link block. This way, you can use your logo as a link to the home page. You can also add a class to your navbar, which will give you the ability to add styles and customize your navbar even further. For example, we can add some spacing and change the background color. We can also give a class to our nav links and customize those appearances as well. Plus, with Webflow, there's no need to create a different navbar for each of your different devices. Webflow saves you the time by automatically generating a mobile-ready navbar that's guaranteed to look great on any device. You can even edit the settings on your mobile navbar by navigating to the Settings panel on the right-hand side. Here you can customize the menu type, ranging from the defaulted drop-down that we see here. We can choose to have it appear over from the left or the right. We can also adjust the easing methods in which it opens and closes and the time it takes to do so. Lastly, we can customize where we would like our mobile nav to appear. It will default to begin at tablet, but we can reset it to begin on mobile, desktop, or not appear at all. Also, be sure to customize your mobile nav by adding classes to the different elements. We can view these elements by opening up the menu with the Open Menu button in the Settings panel. Here, we can do things like edit the menu button, which we also saw in the Navigator panel. For example, we could give it a class and change the background color, as well as change the icon color inside of it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg in what you can do with your navbar, and we can't wait to see what you do with it next. Typography is one of the most powerful ways that you can use to design your website and create an overall amazing user experience. Take, for example, this website, one of our templates here in Webflow, and see how it uses a variety of different typography styles in order to get the feel just right. Whether it's a color, a font type, a font size, font weight, There's a bunch of different things that you can use in order to maximize the potential of all the typography on your site. So how do you go about doing it? Well, in Webflow, it's incredibly easy. All you have to do is just click on the font you want to edit or add a style to. Make sure that there is a style associated or a class associated with that piece of typography over here, in which there is. Navigating down to the typography panel, this is where you're going to navigate, or this is where you're going to add a variety of different styles to your font, starting with the font type itself. Webflow is going to default a variety of different font options and families that you can choose from here. You can also add a variety more from Google Web Fonts, Adobe Typekit, and even upload your own custom fonts, which we touch on in another video as well. You can update and change the font weight. You can update and change the color to a variety, almost near unlimited style and colors. You can also update the font size and the line height. You can also change and update the kerning, or the spacing between each of the letters. Down here, you can work with different things like alignment, making the font all caps, and even things like bullet points and bullet options. Down below here, there's one more feature that you can do with typography that's a lot of fun, and that's adding a text shadow. With text shadows, you can do a number of different things, including changing the color, changing the opacity, and really making it incredibly unique. And what I've shown you is really just the start at what you can do in order to make the typography on your website really stand out. If you ever come to a point where the defaulted font families that Webflow offers aren't enough for you, you can always turn to the massive selection of fonts that are located on either Google Web Fonts, Adobe Typekit, and even upload your own custom fonts. And to do that, all you have to do is go back to your dashboard here in the website settings, the font tab here. This is where you can easily navigate and upload Google Fonts, custom fonts, and even use Typekit as well. For Google Fonts, it's incredibly easy. All you have to do is select from the list, choose the font that you want to use, and then here you can also select the weights that you want to have in the designer as well. To go ahead and see which fonts you can use on Google Fonts, simply click the link over here or navigate to google.com/fonts, and you can get a great view at the variety of different fonts that you can choose from. If you have an Adobe Typekit account, you can seamlessly integrate all of your pre-existing kits from Adobe and easily integrate them onto your websites here. In order to do that, you can go to the help.webflow.com and search for Adobe Typekit. We have a great tutorial on how you can get all that set up for you. For your custom fonts, it's incredibly easy. All you have to do is upload a font file that's either a TTF, OTF, EOT, or WOFF. And all you have to do is simply click Upload. You can search for any fonts that you like. I know, for example, that I want to upload this Nexa Thin. Simply upload it. It's going to try to default a font family for you. In this case, it did it successfully. If it didn't, all you have to do is simply change or edit that font family name there. And then you have to verify or select what font weight you are uploading is. In this case, it's correct. I'm going to choose thin, and then simply click Add Font, and there you go. If I want to upload an additional font to that same class, again, I would do the same thing. Let's go ahead and search. And I search for Nexa again. In this case, I want to upload Nexa Bold. There I get my font family name, which is the same as the previous one. It defaults it at bold, which is great. I'm going to add that font, and now I have both of them to choose from. So now if I navigate back to my design, I should see all the different fonts that I've added. In this case, let's go ahead and check to make sure that we've added our Nexa fonts. And there we have it. So now we have a variety of different fonts that expand just beyond the defaulted Webflow font families. With Webflow, we give you plenty of options to add interactive features across your entire site. The easiest and most common is going to be doing a simple hover treatment, as we see here by hovering over these buttons and links. To add a hover treatment, simply click on the object you'd like to add it to. In this case, I'm going to choose this button. Make sure that it has a class, and if not, you can easily add one. Once you're in the Style panel, simply click on the States dropdown on the top right. In this list, you're going to see the option for Hover. Once clicked, you can now add and change styles that will only appear when this element is being hovered over. On this button, for example, we can do things like change the background color, change the font color, And we can even choose to translate the entire button upwards. Looking at it now in preview mode, we can see that all of these hover effects are working great. To make this hover treatment even more smooth, we can add a transition time to each of the different effects. To do this, simply click back on the button, and in the Style panel, we'll scroll to the very bottom until we get to the Effects section. Now, we want to add transition times to each of the different style changes that we added on hover. So in this case, that includes background color, the font color, and transform. The defaulted value of 500 milliseconds is typically perfect, but you can adjust it to make it faster or slower if you wish. Now, if we preview our page, we can see a nice smooth transition over the button as all of these effects come together. This is perfect. And this was just a glimpse at how you can use hover effects across your site. The best thing to do is to simply play around with all of your different ideas and see what works best for you. In the next video, we'll move on to additional interactions that you can add to your entire site. In the previous video, we covered how hover treatments can lead to an engaging user experience, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. In Webflow, we give you the power to create in-site animations and interactions that before were impossible without writing lines and lines of code. To get a glimpse at the power of these interactions, visit interactions.webflow.com. Webflow interactions are based on triggers, meaning that each of these interactions is set off by a different trigger of your choosing. The triggers that we allow include load, scroll, click, hover, tabs, slider, navbar, and dropdown, so be sure to explore all of them. Let's preview a few of the more common interactions right now. Right off the bat, we're treated with a loading interaction, meaning they are triggered when the page itself loads. If we scroll to the next section, we can see a great example of a scroll interaction, which only occurs as the user scrolls down the page. Here, we can see an example of a click interaction, which is triggered by simply clicking this button, which engages another object on the screen as we see with this element sliding from the side. In the first video, we covered how hover effects can work on buttons and other links, but with Webflow interactions, you can take hover treatments to a whole new level. Notice what happens here when I hover over this element. We can see here that multiple objects are reacting to this hover treatment instead of just the one like we saw in a previous video. And this is just the beginning. Be sure to explore the full Webflow interactions page yourself and watch the many detailed tutorials that we have around each of the triggers. Webflow makes it easier than ever to add and manage your web pages, and much easier than if you were to build the website from scratch. To manage your pages, simply navigate to the Pages panel located on the top left of your screen. Here, you will have the ability to oversee all of your pages and organize them in any order that you wish. This is also where you can create new pages by simply clicking the Create New Page button on the top of the panel. Once clicked, you will have access to all of this page's individual settings. We can also access any page's settings by clicking on the cog icon located on the right of any of the pages. Within these settings, we can duplicate, delete, or even make this page the home page for the entire site. Below is where all the individual page details are located. Here we can classify a parent folder, which I'll touch on in just a moment, the page name, which is only going to be the displayed name that you see here in Webflow, not public for any of the audiences to see, so feel free to name them whatever works best for you. You can also change the slug, which is another term for URL. Below, we even provide a quick little preview of what your URL is going to look like. In this case, you would see your website name, .com/about. Keep in mind that Webflow will default the slug or the URL based on the page name that you selected. So if you'd like to make a change, simply click in the field and change the URL to whatever you wish. These last three fields are all related to the SEO details of your page. The SEO title is the name that the browsers and search engines will display to your audience, which is most commonly seen as the text in your browser tab. The SEO description and SEO keywords allow you to boost your pages and overall websites' search engine rankings. A good SEO description is anywhere between 130 and 170 characters and gives an accurate description of what your site is all about. Think of keywords as the search terms that people would use in order to find your website. So it's important that these keywords match the content and the overall message that your company or your website is trying to give. You can also further organize your pages by using folders. Folders not only help in keeping your pages organized within the panel, but also within the URL as well. If I click into the settings panel of this folder, I can edit the details. Here I can change the name of the folder, but more importantly, I can change the slug or the URL. Why is this important? Well, the URL will be the basis for each of the pages that we have within this folder. For example, here we have a great use case for how folders are being used. In this case, this is a design agency portfolio site, so the use of folders to organize projects is perfect. And notice, if we go to the page settings, the URL will read website.com/projects, which is the name of the parent folder and where we spoke about with the URL, Amazon, which in this case is an example client and also the page name. So not only do folders allow you to better organize your pages panel, but also create a better overall URL structure that will help in user navigation and search engines to crawl your site. And now you understand the full power of the Pages panel and how you can utilize it to create, delete, organize, and edit each of your pages on your website. As your site gets larger and you add more and more content and pages, it can become more difficult to update and manage your website. Symbols is an incredible time-saving feature that allows you to easily manage and update common elements all across your site. For example, let's say that I wanted to make a change to this footer on the home page. Without symbols, I would then have to make this exact same change to the footer on every page of my site. This is horribly inefficient and time-consuming. Instead, what I would do is create a symbol around this footer by simply clicking on the entire object, then navigating to the Assets Manager tab on the top right. Here in the Symbols section, we will simply click the plus button and make a new symbol out of our footer. Now we can place this footer symbol into everywhere we'd like it by simply dragging it onto the page. Now if we were to add, edit, or change anything on this footer, it would be updated wherever this symbol exists. For example, let's say that I add something to this footer section, and now if we go back to the home page, we'll see that the change has also been made here. For a more visual understanding, I've created a section here that has 3 of the same symbols side by side. Notice what happens when I make a change to one of them. It will push the change to the others instantaneously. An image is worth 1,000 words, and in web design, it's no different. That's why in Webflow, we made adding and styling images incredibly easy. And on top of that, allowing you to customize and add classes to these images to even further the amount of customization that you can do. Adding an image in Webflow is incredibly easy. All you have to do is drag in the image widget from the Add panel, simply upload the image that you want from your desktop, and in seconds, you'll see it right on your site. Now from here, you can do a variety of different things, including adding a class. If you add a class to this image, in this case, we will go ahead and name it Photo. We can now add a variety of styles. For example, margin. We could add some margin and some space on the bottom of the photo. We could add some rounded corners down here in the border section. We could also add a border if we wanted to as well. And another cool feature is adding a box shadow down here in the Shadows panel. So we can go ahead and change the color and the different opacity of the shadows that we want to have. And in so many ways, it's very easy to duplicate image simply by using copy and paste. And then once an image is on your site, you can simply drag it to the different places in which you want it to go. Now, you can always drag in images. Another popular way to do it is to add background images. For example, I have an image that I've already uploaded here. Let's say I want to add or replace it with a new image. Simply go down to the background section now that this div block in this case has a class. I'm going to select image, upload image, and we can replace it with anything that we'd like. In this case, I have a background image already ready. It defaults at none of these selected options here. What we're going to go ahead and do is to choose cover. Cover is going to take into account the full section in which the image is located. In this case, it's going to cover the hero section that we have it placed in. We also have the option to add tiles. We can align it to different parts of the screen. In this case, we're going to center it right in the middle. I'm not going to add any tile in this case, so I'm going to go ahead and press the X. In a fixed option, which is really cool, notice right now the image is not fixed. Simply by clicking this little check mark here, we can add a fixed image directly into the background. So in this case, in Webflow, not only can you add and drag in images directly onto your site, like we did down here, you can also use the powerful feature of background images as well. Social media can be a very important aspect of your business and website, which is why the ability to add widgets like Facebook, Twitter, and Google+ right to your website is incredibly important. We make it really easy by just adding in the widgets. In the widgets, you can simply update or customize the widgets as you see fit to best fit your website design. And all you have to do is make sure that you type in the proper URL to each of your different social accounts. If it's important for users to find you on a map, we have a widget for that too. All you have to do is go in and drag the map widget to the portion of your site in which you want it to live, copy in or paste your address, and there you go. And just like all of our other widgets, in the settings panel over here, you can further customize your map widget by changing the zoom level, the map type, and even toggling whether or not you want to touch and drag on the map and add a scroll wheel. And just like that, you can make it easy for your users to find you on a map, as well as engage with you on social media. Building websites in Webflow is incredibly easy, but we all know that the end goal is to share it with the rest of the world, which is why in Webflow, you're only one click away. By clicking Publish on the top right of your page, you can instantly push your website live. Once live, you'll experience an incredibly fast and even more reliable hosting platform. And the best part is, you can continue to publish your site even after it's live. If you have a quick change, go back to the designer, make the change, republish your site, and you're good to go, just like that. You can also use your own custom domain by going to the Site Settings, into the Hosting tab, and then simply adding in your own custom domain. Your new site can be live in minutes. After you've published your website, the next thing you can do is help people find it. To do this, Webflow offers multiple SEO optimizations to better help search engines crawl and index your site. The first thing you can do to better optimize your website is in the page settings itself. Here you can add an SEO title, which is what is going to be displayed on the Browser tab as your user is scrolling through your site, followed by the SEO description and keywords to better help Google and other search engines better understand your site. The easier for search engines to better understand your site, the better placement you get in search results, and therefore the easier it is for your users to find you. You can also add site-wide SEO optimizations from your site settings within the SEO tab. Here you can add a meta title, a meta description, a robots.txt file, and a sitemap. We also provide some tips on how you can best optimize these sections to get better results. In this video, we're going to show the true power of Webflow in building a one-page responsive website in under 30 minutes. We're going to go ahead and get started by duplicating this website that we see here. We're going to start with a blank canvas. The only thing on this site right now is the body and the navigator panel. We're going to put all of our content inside of this, starting with our nav bar. When dragging in the nav bar into Webflow, it's going to default some nav links as well as provide a brand link block to put your logo in. The nav bar will also work on all of your different devices. Now with many of the elements in Webflow, you're going to go through the process of adding them on the page and then adding classes to them in order to add styles. In this case, we've added the nav bar, but in order to style the nav bar, we need to first add a class. So in the style panel on the right hand, into the brand link block. And then you can upload your logo file. Once uploaded, you can adjust the width or height to fit your needs. In this case, I'm going to use 280 pixels. Now that the logo's in there, only thing that's left is to adjust the nav links. Webflow will default 3 nav links for you, but there are no classes attributed to them. So the first thing we want to do is to click one and add a class. Now that the class has been added, we can adjust the styles. The first is the font color to be a light gray. And then to adjust the font size to be 15, and then to make all the letters uppercase. Now what we could do is simply add an additional class to each of these elements. And notice it'll copy over the same styles as the previous class. Now, because we need 4, all we need to do is simply click on one and then use copy and paste on our keyboard. Another important thing to look at when you're using links is to add hover treatments. In order to do that, simply click on the link, and in the Styles panel, locate the States menu and select Hover. Once you do, any of the styles that you change here will only take effect when you hover over that element. In this case, what I want to happen is change the font color to pink. Notice now when we hover over each of these nav links, the font color changes to the pink. However, it happens pretty fast. Another thing that you'll do with links is add transitions. At the very bottom of the Style panel, in the Transitions section, we can add a transition for font color. The defaulted value is going to be 500 milliseconds, which is typically perfect. And notice now, when you hover over the elements, there's a nice transition effect. Now all we need to do is update the content in the nav bar, which I'm going to fast forward through right now. Perfect. Now our nav bar is complete. The next thing we want to do is start adding in our hero section content. The first thing we want to do is drag in a container, which is going to hold all of our content elements in place. Notice now the container is moved up behind the nav bar, so what we want to do is add some padding to push that container down. So clicking on the hero section, we can adjust padding on the inside to push the nav bar a little bit further down to the middle of the hero section. Now we can begin to add our content within the container, starting with the heading. Below this heading, I want to add some additional text, so I'm going to drag in a text block. The text block, I'm going to also give a class to. In this case, I'm going to call it a hero subheading, and begin to style it. I'm going to change the font color to be white, adjust the font weight, also adjust the font size, and the line height. I also want to adjust it so that the width is only 60% of the container that it's in. So I can type in 60%. Great, now below this, I want to add a button, which I'll do by simply dragging it onto the page. And I will drag it within the container. I've already added some styles to this button, but if we look over in the Style panel, we can see what those are. The first thing I've done is added some padding inside of the button to give it some space. I've also changed the font color to be white, centered the content, added a fill color, which in this case is a pink with a slight opacity, as we can see here. And I've also added some borders around each of the sides of 3 pixels and a border radius, which is going to curve the corners of the button. There's also a transition effect to adjust when the background color is being hovered upon. So in this case, if I was to hover over the button, notice that the background color transitions from a pink with a slight opacity to a pink with a full opacity. I also want to add some space between my hero subheading and my button. To do that, I'll click on my hero subheading and add some margin below it. There we go. Now all I need to do is update my content inside of the hero section. There we go. So now we've completed our nav bar and our hero section. The next section that we want to add is a 3-column layout section, which will start by adding in a section element. We'll drag it into the body which will appear below the Heroes section. I'm also going to give this section a class. It's going to be the same class that all of my sections on the page will use. The common element or style that these sections will have will be some padding on the top and the bottom of 70 pixels. The next thing I want to do is add in my container, which is going to hold all of my content elements inside of it. The first thing I want to add is my heading. In this case, I want it to be an H2. Below this H2 is where my columns will live. Webflow makes it super easy to add columns by simply dragging in the columns element and then adjusting how many columns you'd like to have. In this case, click on the button and your website can be live in seconds. The final panels are located here on the right-hand side of your screen. This is where the Style, Settings, Navigator, Style Manager, and Symbols panel are located. The Style panel is one that you're going to be using quite a bit. It's where you're going to be adding classes and styling all the different elements on your website. The Settings panel allows you to edit the settings of many of the elements on your page, like links, buttons, nav bars, sliders, and more. Pretty much every element that you click on will have settings here. The Navigator panel is an incredibly powerful tool. Not only can you view the structure of your entire website, but you can also move any of those elements throughout your website with ease. The Style Manager gives you a view of all the classes that are being used on your website. You also have the ability to edit and change the name of them. The last panel is your Assets panel, which includes both symbols and interactions, two features that are incredibly important in improving your workflow and in adding engaging interactions onto your website. We'll cover both of these in later videos. And that's it. Again, at first it feels like a lot, but we're confident with a little time and practice, you'll be a pro in no time. As there's a lot of fantastic time-saving elements in there. On the very top left of the Webflow Designer, you'll have the Back to Dashboard button, which will simply take you back to your dashboard. Next to the Dashboard button, you have the Preview button, which takes on the shape of an eye. This feature is incredibly powerful and allows you to view your site live in the browser before publishing it. Also on the top of the Designer, you'll have your different device views, which is an incredibly powerful Webflow feature that allows you to view your site on each device and make style changes accordingly. On the top right, you'll have another handful of very useful buttons. The first are your undo and redo buttons, which might come in handy. The next is an icon that lets you know if your page is currently saved. The green check mark, which we see here, means that our page is saved, so we could leave and not lose any of our content. If this icon is red, it means that changes could not be saved, typically due to a bad internet connection. The next is to export your website. Webflow prides itself on creating clean CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. And here you can choose to export the code and use it any way you wish. It will also export any image or font assets that you have on the site. Lastly, we have the Publish button, the magic little link that will take your site live for the rest of the world to see. Simply click forms, and interactions. Each of these templates are also tested and will work on all of your different devices. Plus, we add more all the time, so be sure to check out webflow.com/templates anytime. Who knows? The next template entry might be yours. When you first enter the Webflow designer, it can be a little overwhelming, but with a little time and practice, it'll feel like second nature. Starting on the left-hand side, you'll have your Add Elements and Pages panels. The Add Elements panel is where you'll find all of the objects, widgets, and elements you'll use to add to your page, including some of the basic layout options, typography, media, as well as your favorite features like sliders and nav bars. Anything you need to add to your page or website, you'll find here. In the Pages panel, you'll be able to see an overview of all the pages on your website. This is not only where you can select and organize all of your pages, but also where you can add and duplicate new pages. Down on the left-hand side, you'll find additional features that will help in your designing process. You can choose to show or hide an element's edges, show empty elements, view your page's grid system, and also a nifty X-ray mode that will give you a deeper view at how your elements are laid out on the page. On the bottom, we have further help resources, including more videos and help documentation. I also recommend taking a look at the keyboard shortcut. Starting a website in Webflow is incredibly easy, and we give you multiple ways to go about doing it. Once you're ready, simply click the New Website button on the top right of your dashboard. Before selecting your starting point, you'll need to give both a name and a subdomain for your website. The name is what will appear both on your dashboard as the name of your site, but it will also appear on the tab of the browser when the users visit your site. Your subdomain is what will be used for the link generated in Webflow. You can also add custom domains, which we'll touch on later. Before starting your website, you have the option to either start a site from scratch or use one of our many fantastic templates. If you want the most customization, you can start with the blank site. This will give you a near unlimited amount of customization options to fulfill any look and feel you want for your site. If you want to get going a little bit faster or have something with the basics already in place, you can choose one of our many free and premium templates. These templates range from one-page wonders to multi-page websites, each preloaded with features including nav bars, sliders, forms,